moment and then you lost it.
Oh, well. It was nice while it lasted, right?
Sure. It was nice while it lasted.
Assemble.
What the f is contemporary art? Right? I think most people agree that art in the modern day has been completely fractured. Gone are the days of defined artistic movements like Impressionism, Cubism. Hell, even the notoriously misused label of modern art, when used accurately, has such consistent theming that binds all of it together. And even outside of stationary visual art, the supposed death of the monoculture has left music, cinema, fashion, architecture, and so on completely disconnected. So much so that many have started to define contemporary art by this disconnection. This seems to be the emerging consensus in art analysts and historians, so much so that trying to fit contemporary art into a box, a consistent set of themes and ideas that unites it all, seems foolish. But what if we tried anyway? Because I believe that contemporary art, from Taylor Swift to Yayoi Kusama, and even things like Liminal Spaces and Brain Rot, can be connected by what I'm calling the three dualities of contemporary art. But before we can begin diving into what those are, a quick disclaimer. As always, I am not an expert. This video is just my opinions and is meant to hopefully spur on discussion. This is by no means a definitive or all-encompassing list, nor do I actually believe you could make such a thing about any artistic era, especially within the constraints of a YouTube essay. But I do think I have some interesting ideas here, and also this is primarily talking about the United States as that's where I live, but I'm sure a lot of this can be applied to other cultures and countries. If you enjoy the video and you want to show support, leave a comment down below, hit the like button, maybe subscribe. It really helps out and I appreciate it a lot. Without any further ado, let's get into it with duality number 1, individual versus corporate. A little while back, I was having a discussion with my roommate at the time, and that discussion was on whether or not we are currently living in the hardest or easiest time to be an artist. Our conversation was, as you might expect, largely focused on the rise of the internet and how that has affected people's abilities to express themselves and even make a living off of said expression. The eventual conclusion we came to is that it is in some ways easier than ever to be an artist and in some ways harder, with a general trend towards increased difficulty. Let me explain. Since the advent of the internet, it has been the place for individual artists to upload their work and get eyes on it, with some people gathering large enough audiences to make some money out of it, and fewer still breaking out of internet fame into the realm of serious commercial and professional success. More on that in a bit, but at the same time, traditional forms of art continue to be dominated by large corporate entities. Hollywood in film, large labels and distributors in music, etc. I think the interaction between individual expression and corporate consolidation is a defining feature of contemporary art, and one that goes beyond just online and the entertainment space. I think other good examples are things like graffiti, which got its real start in the 1960s and has been a staple in urban environments ever since, contrasting corporate architecture, or the rise of individualistic fashion against more streamlined styles, as well as thrifting culture. As you can probably tell, my definition of contemporary stretches a bit out of just the 21st century, as I think these trends have been in motion for a few decades and have only escalated recently, with the computer and internet revolutions again making it easier than ever for individuals to express themselves and find an audience. However, I think things have actually begun to swing in the other direction. Well, the internet started off as a sort of Wild West, an uncharted landscape of entertainment where it felt like anyone could just pick up a camera and make something. We've started to see things get more and more consolidated. Not to say you can't jump on and make stuff anymore, I mean, what am I doing here? But, well, just take a look at this list of the top 50 most viewed YouTube channels. 29 of them are owned by media conglomerates, and then you have the Mr. Beasts of the world, which, while not technically a media conglomerate per se, it definitely is a massive operation of its own. And a lot of my favorite creators on this platform employ teams of editors to remain competitive. Again, not to say individual artists and content creators can't make a splash anymore, but as the natural progression of competition takes its place, I theorize this trend, the one of consolidation, will continue. On a similar note, a few artists have begun to break out of the internet world after gaining enough success there and entering the larger entertainment industry, which on its face is like an awesome thing to see, but also requires a little bit of further analysis. I want to take the TV show Has Been Hotel as an example. What started as a pilot on YouTube got so much attention and support that it was eventually picked up by Amazon and is now set for its 3rd and 4th season on the platform. Which, seems like a massive win for indie animation, right? And well, it kinda? Except for the fact that pretty much every artist involved with the original pilot besides the creator were fired and replaced with people already in the industry. So I think this is also why we've seen the rise of so many indie musicians experimenting with new and revitalized genres of music, but those who reach true massive success are those who popularize and streamline it. Which isn't a dig, nor is it a new phenomenon. I, for one, love a lot of pop artists. I mean, it's called pop music for a reason. But it is kind of exemplary of the divide. Exemplary? But it is sort of exemplary of the divide between individual expression and those who break into the larger cultural zeitgeist with corporate backing. Add in the rise of AI, making the internet yet more hostile to individual new artists, and the growing desire for offline community and connection, and it all leads me to theorize, and this is purely speculation based on my own anecdotal experience, that we will see the return of offline indie artistic expressionism, garage bands, and things of that nature. But maybe that's just wishful thinking. For now, let's continue on to the second duality of contemporary art. There used to be a barn near my house growing up. It wasn't in use, even then, having been built in the 1800s. It would hardly be a safe place for livestock or even storing crops. Still, that decaying wood was the background for many family and school dance pictures, the backdrop to picnics and walks. Today, this is all that remains of that barn. It was torn down for safety reasons. There's a feeling that sits on my shoulders heavily when I look at this ruined foundation. A feeling I get when I see the storefront my family's favorite mom-and-pop pizza shop used to inhabit before it went under, and the many fast food chains that have opened since. Duality number 2. Growth versus decay. The art of an era is always a reaction to the economic conditions of said era. So, with that said, I want to show you 2 graphs that I think are vital to understanding contemporary art. This is a graph showing the growth of the United States' gross domestic product, or GDP, since 1987. You can think of it as the cumulative wealth of the nation, factoring in things like private consumption, government and private investment, and net exports. And this is a graph showing the share of all wealth in the US owned by the top 1 and 0.5%. As you can see, as the US economy has grown, so has the percentage of wealth owned by the very top. Meanwhile, continued inflation, housing market consolidation, and cost of living increases, which have not been parodied in wages, and the new generation of Americans are, for the first time in a century, worse off than their parents. Speaking of market consolidation, this is another defining feature of the 21st century US economy, as we've seen fewer and fewer companies dominate every industry. And these trends have been reflected in the aesthetics of our time, especially our architecture. As the biggest restaurant chains continue to take up more and more market share, they not only open more locations, but have changed up their aesthetics to match the new economic meta, streamlining their look to take advantage of the increased value of real estate. An increased value of real estate that has also spurred on the continued rise of mass-produced suburban and townhomes. All of this, from increased economic anxiety to less personality-filled architecture, has had a tangible effect on the cultural zeitgeist, perhaps most clearly seen in the rise of nostalgia, with things like Liminal Spaces and analog horror playing heavily on this feeling, both of which I believe could be seen as artistic movements all their own. I want to linger on analog horror actually here for a moment, as some of the biggest and, in my opinion, best examples of the genre also play on another theme, that being the end of the world. But not a bombastic nuclear fire type end of the world that was the worry during the Cold War, a more gradual apocalypse. Slow, yet inevitable. And I think this is playing to another cultural result of this economic duality between growth and decay: the rise of hopelessness and nihilism. Now, nihilism is a complex subject, but at its most simple, it's a philosophy that seeks to reckon with the fact that life, in its view, is devoid of inherent meaning. Now, I actually sort of consider myself a sort of optimistic nihilist in the way that I think the universe and reality is so vast that the idea of life having meaning, as we think of it, is ironically a meaningless idea. But I don't think that inherent meaning is necessary to enjoy life or to fight for what you think is right. Contrastly, a lot of modern nihilism takes this idea in the other direction, giving in to hopelessness and pessimism. This hopelessness towards life, and especially towards the future, has seen quite a rapid growth in our culture in recent years, likely as a result of the shifting economics of our time. A recent Gallup poll put the amount of Americans who feel hopeful for the future at 59%, down 9.1 since 2020. And I mean, hey, I guess that's still a majority. I think this rise in nihilism can be very clearly seen in pop culture, with things like brain rot being so pervasive, and in its most harmful manifestations, incel culture and right-wing extremist terrorism. This brings us neatly to our third and final duality of contemporary art: deconstruction and reconstruction. For some background, historians and sociologists like to split, especially Western history, into sort of artistic/political/cultural eras. Examples being Romanticism, Realism, and Modernism. It's not an exact science, but more helpful lenses to look at the trends of a time through. Since the mid-1900s, especially American culture has been largely influenced by what many have come to call postmodernism. To grossly oversimplify, postmodernism can be largely defined by a lack of emphasis on firm ideological values, in massive contrast to the very ideological decades of the early 1900s, modernism, largely due to disillusionment with said ideologicalism due to the massive amount of upheaval brought on during the Second World War and even the Cold War. A massive attribute of postmodernist art and culture is irony and the deconstruction of the sincere. Especially after the fall of the Soviet Union, there was this feeling that neoliberal capitalism had won out over all other systems and political ideas, and that history was over. However, as the cracks began to show in this new world order by the 2008 financial crisis, increased global warming and wealth consolidation, and even things like COVID-19 and the pandemic, a new force began to rise to challenge postmodernism. Meta-modernism. Which, side note, these names are just terrible. We really need to get through our heads that history doesn't stop moving. Metamodernism, first coined by Professor Masoud Zavarzadeh in 1975, and later expanded upon into its modern-day form by Dutch theorists Timotheus Vermeulen and Robin van den Akker in 2010, sees the reintroduction of sincere ideological values, but only in companionship with the irony and seeming insincerity of postmodernism, oscillating between the two. I think some good political examples of modernism is the Trumpist and MAGA movement on the right, which combines a more firm ideological vision with the irony-fueled shitposting, also attracting some of the most harmful nihilistic forces we discussed earlier. And even someone like Zoran Mamdani on the left, who, while much more ideologically focused than the status quo, he still relies largely on the personality politics that became a staple in postmodern politics. On the art side, I think a great example of metamodernism is the show BoJack Horseman, one of my favorite shows of all time, which attempts to both deconstruct the world around us as well as reconstruct something in its place at the same time. If you want a more in-depth look at the differences between post and metamodernism, Tom Nicholas has a fantastic video on the subject. Though I actually want to add in a third force to this sort of cultural battle, that being neo-modernism, the return to well-defined values and ideologies. However, I do want to say that for this one, I really extra despise the name, as I don't see this as a return to the past, but rather the conclusion of the reconstructions of metamodernism following the deconstructions of postmodernism. And I think it is this deconstruction and reconstruction that is the final, for this video at least, defining feature of contemporary art. Art of a world which is ending, or rather, has ended, and is being actively reborn. I've sometimes seen people in the comments of my videos calling them doomer shit, and I find that really interesting because I really don't consider myself a doomer. And I think this notion stems from the fact that I speak quite candidly about both the negative things going on in the world and my own personal negative emotions. And, well, that's because I think that's super important. I really don't believe in lying to myself, as quite often I see right through it. So let's not lie. The world can be pretty shitty sometimes. Hell, sometimes it even feels like it's ending. And you and me, as human beings in that world, are gonna feel pretty shitty as well. And that shouldn't be suppressed, but neither should it be wallowed in. Acceptance is the most important step in processing these feelings, but acceptance is not the same as resignation. And that's why I always end these videos with a call to action, to organize and fight, because that is the greatest antidote to toxic nihilism. Deciding that despite the sometimes overwhelming nature of the pains that plague our world, you're gonna fight back against it. And that goes beyond just organization, though I do think that is supremely important. It means that you're gonna decide to love despite the hate. Love yourself and love others, and live on each and every day, even if sometimes even that feels like too much to bear. I truly believe that life, whether completely arbitrary or full of intrinsic meaning, is extraordinary. A flash in the pan that for all we know we may never get to experience again. So feel the pain, feel the anger, feel the joy and sadness and love. Make art about it. Deconstruct and reconstruct. These are the things that make us human. And that might just be the most precious thing of all. So as always, this is James D, urging you to get out there, get organized, and keep fighting. Thank you for watching.